Hello, everybody, for real this time. Welcome, wherever you are, whenever you are, whoever you are, to the third and final installment of the Spring 2025 Great Lakes Book Club series. My name is Chris Shell again. Hello, hello. I'm the experience manager here at the National Museum of the Great Lakes, and I'm very happy that all of you are able to join us for the last book club of 2025. There's plenty of books to read, and I know that Faith and I will be reading away until next year and our book club returns. But I think we're ending it off with a pretty good book, actually, one that I think is really exciting and I'm looking forward to talking about. Before I do that, though, I wanted to have a little housekeeping things. Pulling at my notes, that's right, the salmon capital, there it is. The Great Lakes Book Club is a critical component of the mission of the National Museum of the Great Lakes. Our mission is to preserve, share, and celebrate the past, present, and future of the Great Lakes story. And I think this book is really, really great way of preserving and sharing and celebrating the story of, our region, the industry, things of that nature. If you, for, some reason, do not own the book or haven't purchased the book or something like that, and you would like to purchase the book, maybe you rented it from your local library, maybe you have an ebook, you can purchase it at nmglstore.org. I have a link in the chat there. You can purchase our past book club books at nmglstore.org as well. If you missed February or March's meeting, they're pretty good books, and I'd recommend purchasing them, or you can also support your local library. If this is your first event for the National Museum of the Great Lakes, or you want to see what else we offer, we also have a complete list of our events for the year at nmgl.org/events. That is also in the chat. This is the last Great Lakes Book Club of the year, but we have quite a few other pretty exciting events. And as the weather gets nicer here in Toledo, we'll have some pretty nice weather events too outside, right? We can go outside in the sun, enjoy ourselves, things like that. Last but not least, the National Museum of the Great Lakes. If you came today, you would see a little construction. We don't always have construction here at the museum, but actually we are just about to finish, and depending on when you're watching this, we may have already finished the second wave expansion here at the National Museum of the Great Lakes. I'm moving my hands too much. I'm knocking my headphones out. I'm just so excited about I'm just so excited about the second wave expansion. Sorry about that. The second wave expansion here is our really, once in a lifetime 5,000 square feet expansion of the National Museum of the Great Lakes. It is a component of our, mission to preserve, celebrate, share history, past, present, future of the Great Lakes, but also, an opportunity to connect people with more stories of the Great Lakes and things of that nature. So if you're interested, go to the link, nmgl.org/the second wave to learn more. But with all of that said, without further ado, I'm very fortunate to be able to introduce the host of today's Great Lakes Book Club, lead museum educator Faith Curry. All of you are aware of Faith by this point, the woman of excellent questions. Here she is, Faith. Today, if you would like to engage, there are a couple ways you could do it today. You could place your questions in the chat, and I could be your voice if you'd like. Alternatively, if you have something that moves you to speak, you could raise your hand, turn your camera on, speak. Depending on how many people try to talk at once, we might, we'll all navigate it. We're all adults here. We'll all be great. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce and hand it over to Faith. Hi, Faith. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I just want to reiterate what Chris said. We're just a small group. We don't have an author this month. We can just have a conversation with each other about this book. So do feel free to use your microphone, use your camera whenever you want. Okay. I was excited to choose this book for this year. I was excited about all of them because I knew that they would appeal to a wide range of people. But I was especially excited about this one. I'm from Michigan. I've been to Rogers City. Even people who haven't been to Rogers City are familiar with Rogers City. It's a place you hear about because it's a place where people go. And I love a good oral history. And Carson Prichard, the author who was at CMU at the time, I think he did a really great job with this. He is in Florida now. I do not have his YouTube channel address in front of me, but Carson has a YouTube channel where he mostly makes videos of himself fishing. He got a new boat, and he does talk about the like foliage, the trees, the water, which parts of it are affecting where the fish are. And he likes to go out in his boat and make fishing videos where he's talking about science at the same time. So if you like those, you might want to add his to your fishing video repertoire of things that you're interested in. So I'll start right with the beginning of the book. I'm going to reference my notes here for our conversation. And I loved the prologue in this book. I am honestly sometimes a prologue skipper, or I'll skim it, or, at the beginning of a book, I'll think, I wonder if I'm not getting this because I should have read the prologue, right? But this prologue I thought was done so well. He talked about his process, about what inspired him. He talked about his planning, his methods, and I felt like really invited into his process, the way that he wrote this prologue. And so I'm interested if the rest of you felt the same way about the prologue, if you usually read them or skip them, if you felt invited in. Did anybody like if you read the prologue, did you feel that it was like different and better than prologues in a lot of nonfiction books you encounter? I just felt really comfortable and invited by it into the process. Ready? You could put it in the chat or talk. Chris, what about you? What did you think about the prologue?
I really loved, I don't want to just echo your sentiments, Faith, but I really loved the prologue. I see B in the chat says they always read the prologue of the book. Yeah, me too. I'm a big prologue
Good.
enjoyer. I think that, some books, I agree with you too, that I think this, was really well done. Some prologues really show how the sausage was made in a way that kind of isn't additive to the book, but I actually think this one really frames the whole structure of it really well. Um, and I think that, without it, maybe I would have felt a little bit more lost, actually.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he's just set it up in such a welcoming way, that it didn't seem, sometimes nonfiction can lean a little too heavily toward like an academic style. And I don't think he did that in this whole book. I think it was very welcoming and interesting. I also so with the oral histories, we'll start with that because he starts with it and he dives right in. So he invites us into the book and then he gets right to the oral histories. And I was surprised. I like oral histories, but I was surprised that after reading them, then there were more and there were more.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I thought this is really great. And the way he set it up at the beginning, like a cast of characters in a play, I thought that part was especially nice and helpful. I did find myself referring back to it to help me keep people straight and who was who. It was nice to have that list. If it hadn't been there, I would have felt compelled to make one, but he did it for us, right? And I'm wondering if people who stuck with the whole book, did you have a favorite character? Was there one voice that you related with the most or that stood out to you? I have an answer for that, but I'm interested in if people who were reading and keeping up once the oral history started, did you use that list to keep them straight? And did you have a favorite character, like that you were happy to see each time that person's voice came into it? Anyone? Or did you like oh, here's someone. Is Troy gonna speak? Let's see. We had some new people join. Since we made it clear that you should feel welcome to turn your
Mhm.
mic on and turn your camera on. We're gonna have, this is a casual, discussion about the book, like a book club. And so feel free to answer the questions and to use your mics and video, whichever you choose, whatever you're comfortable with. Or the
I
chat.
I would, yeah, while people are chatting away, I would love to say, I actually thought Carson was my favorite character of the ensemble cast, just because I think he was a light touch. You know, he was the narrator that kept the conversation going, and I felt he added, just snippets of information or contextualized things in a way that, like, a good author, right? Where I've seen a lot of books where they interview people and they will interview, you know, let's say I'm interviewing you, Faith, and then the whole chapter is,
Mhm.
well, here's who Faith is, here's their background, and then here's what Faith has to say from start to finish about this topic. And maybe you'll come back later. But what I like that Carson does is he, integrates them, kind of all of them, not all of them at the same time, but he integrates them kind of in conversation with each other, right? And uses himself as the through line to kind of keep things forward. But I would love to hear if anyone has a favorite character, or even Faith, who was your favorite of these character on this
I
cast of
didn't have a
characters?
particular favorite interviewee. I didn't think. I mean, it kind of changed throughout, but what I found throughout, because you're hearing the voice so much of each of the interviewees and over different subjects, I felt like I know that they were in the room one at a time with Carson when he was recording them, right? But as I was reading, those pieces all made a conversation for me. And it was almost the experience of you're listening to all these people in a conversation with each other. And so as a reader, I because of the repetition of seeing the same people and the way that Carson arranged them and made them the focus of the book, I really did like feel like that. Like I was witnessing a conversation between the opinions and the ideas. And the way he edited them, like I said, he interviewed them in one piece. And we have a link where you can listen to those interviews online that we'll put in if you haven't already found out from reading the book. But the interviews are available online. And when you see how like one person might be an hour long, or there was one that was, longer, then it really gives perspective on how he edited it into little pieces back and forth that switched. And I think he just really did a good job with that. And I've also listened to some of the longer interviews. I attended a webinar where Carson was giving a presentation on the book from several months ago. And his whole presentation was mostly playing the interviews. He even in that situation, he sat back and let the stories do the talking. Um, so if you let's see, did you put the link in there, Chris?
I put the link to his YouTube channel in the chat. Yes.
Okay, did you put the link to the oral interviews?
I was actually just about to put that in.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so Chris is going to drop the link for the Michiganology website where you can listen to the oral interviews. There's a lot of material there, but it's interesting to see that people were interviewed in like big chunks and maybe a revisit where you can hear that it picks back up. But uh, I just think that the way he edited them into the book and their little pieces, that he did a fine job with that. Did other people find that too? Did you like get that kind of like, this is a conversation? The story feels like a conversation. I know Chris did. Oh, what we have one in the chat. Can you read?
I'd be happy to. Paulette says, it seems to me that Carson had a few folks in the room at the same time.
Right,
They would respond to each other and not to Carson. Yeah, very well put. The paragraph breaks were where the previous group chat ended.
right. And but like one recording, you're right. I probably didn't explain what I meant well, but the the recordings were long pieces. And so the way that he edited them together, yeah, but that's a good point that I didn't make um clear. But when they're individual recordings. Yeah. And then we have another person, Bill. Okay. Okay, I think that's Bill with his mic on. Did you have a comment, Bill?
Not at this time, thanks.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Um,
I did also want to add, if I may, quickly, that one thing I like about the cast of characters, it almost reminded me of like an Agatha Christie novel or something, right? Where the beginning of the book, you just get to preface you get to kind of piece together what you're going to read about through this cast of characters. But really, too, I think it gives Carson a lot of credibility, right? Well, right at the front, he basically places the importance of this work on the shoulders of people who have firsthand experience or have academic research or have, storied careers. And I think, it really, he really does a great job of building his case, uh, if you would, I guess the case for, the salmon capital of Michigan, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point to move on to like what he did well. I think he did a great job when he explained and set up the way that the food chain worked and how, the alewives and what's happening affected the salmon, production, the growth. But the way that he integrated, here's what happened with the ecological aspects. Here's the fish, here's the food chain. When this and and he just like kind of effortlessly did the same way with the community, right? So when this happens for the people, they thrive, and when this happens, they don't. And if you introduce this, it can grow. And so I really got the sense of the like interconnectedness of these are two individual parts, but also you can, that they're part of a whole. And so the community, was really affected, but they have all the same stages as the salmon, like it's interdependent and both groups follow the same path. And I wondered if anyone else thought it when they were reading it. I mean, some people might be really well, versed in it, but I really wondered when people were reading it, did you like learn something new about how the food chain worked with that? But also, did you think about the interconnectedness in a different or more meaningful way? And I really wondered if anyone who read the book who's attending, or send an email to me if you're one of the people who if it's watching this afterward. We would love to know. Did anybody have personal experience with fishing on that Huron coast in Michigan, or with the salmon like that? I mean, I have a short answer, but we have something in the
Yeah, I'd love to read. So as a
okay.
little follow-up to our last quick question, Paulette said that they've only read one other book written in oral history style. Yeah, not very, I haven't read too many others. And the one Paulette read was about a 60s girl group with the surviving members of the girl group, like the Supremes, etc. Paulette, if you know the title of the book, that'd be really interesting. One that I read, uh, which is fiction, is called Daisy Joan and the Six, which is kind of similar oral history music. But on to Faith's question, 15139 in the chat said that they thought it raised interesting questions about pitfalls of any approach to management. Yeah, which is especially true. Carson definitely seems to come down on the side of the fishery and has certainly had its successes, but the whole development of the salmon fishery was a decision made by DNR staff in Michigan without consideration of the other states or Canada, which they said wouldn't happen today. And that, wow, just so true. And that all of these developments have both been positive and negative, that aren't always considered at the time they're initiated. Which is such an interesting comment, right? That, I mean, these decisions aren't always necessarily thought of in the long term or in the whole scheme of things. Faith, do you have any thoughts about that?
Um, yeah, I think that Carson, like I don't think he tried to hide it, and I like this part,
Mhm.
that he had a lot of respect and affinity with the fishers he was speaking to and the ones who thought like this is great for our community. And because I know that like, I mean, Carson is, down in Florida talking about fishing and making his own fishing, videos on YouTube. He wasn't just a researcher, I think that's the other reason it comes down on that side is because he is looking at it from a scientific degree and research perspective, right? So sometimes the more information you have, the more you are in support of it because you're working with that data, right? But he's also has a lot of respect for the sport of fishing because that's something that he participates in. And I think there are a few reasons it wouldn't happen now, but primarily because there are a lot of organizations set up now for cooperation that have to sign off and consider ramifications for everyone in like a watershed or in a body of water when those things happen.
Yeah,
And
I'll
Paul
get.
said something else here. Let's
Oh
see.
yeah, can I add a quick note before we get to Paulette's quick question?
Yes.
Or the question. I do think that, historically you'll see this in industry across the Great Lakes, where there was a focus on this sort of boundless growth. It's instead of, sustainability in the long term. And I think, you'll see it with any of the fields in the Great Lakes industries, right? That they kind of, took out their own foundation in the process, where they kind of cannibalized their own resources, being very, sweeping generalization, right?
Mhm.
Cannibalize their own resources to prevent future generations, or without this long-term thought, in a way that you'll see time and time again, field after field, right? Paulette's quick question. One of the questions I thought had been alluded to but never answered was the salmon added to Lake Huron being a major hit to the alewives. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Did I miss the discussion in the book?
Um, I don't think you necessarily missed it, but he talked about it in a different part, and also not everything that I heard in an oral history necessarily made it to getting quoted in the book. So something I say might be because of something I heard Carson say at a lecture or because of the oral history. So I apologize if I get something like that that wasn't quite in the book. But when you introduce like basically that predator, I mean, he does say, and that they do discuss that the alewife population also went down, right? So it was down and then it rose and then it went down again. But another thing that got affected, um, he bases it on the alewives, but also smelt were an issue. And smelt populations also went down for years and are coming back a little bit now. But when I, was a kid growing up in Michigan, like if you didn't go smelt dipping, somebody you knew did, if you lived in a rural area. And so there were always, for years, you would just like get this phone call, like, at dinner time or something, we were smelt dipping all day, or we were, doing this all day. Do you want any? And people, there was enough, even in like inland Michigan and, making it to the lakes and rivers, that it was just constantly available. And the introducing salmon did mean that there were more of the larger animals eating the smaller ones. So the populations didn't reproduce at the same speed as the growth of the fishery.
I quick note. Thank you for that, babe.
Uh-huh.
Paulette said the '60s girl group oral history book is "But Will You Love Me Tomorrow?" That's really. I'm going to add that to my list. 15139 adds, I also think Carson brings in not just science, but economics. Yeah, which is very true. Big driving force, right? Which is a worthy perspective. But I think too many environmentalists forget that there is no realistic way to return to a natural Great Lakes. Yeah, that's, I mean, certainly true at this point, right? In this world that we're so dependent on them. And then they go on, as this story demonstrates, that ship sailed decades ago. Yeah. Seemed to me today it is about striking a balance with sustainability, protection, and economic considerations. I think the shift today is generally away from conservation, tilted more towards economics, for better or worse.
Yeah, in some ways it is, but I I do know that a lot of the economic what do I want to say, enterprises, the ones who exist for that. I can use shipping as an example because we work with a lot of people who work with freight companies here at the museum. The freight companies have environmental impact people on their staffs now. And some of them, of course, it started because you have to comply, but many of the shipping companies now are moving ahead of how do we comply to how do we become a good corporate citizen? They can't negate everything they do, but they are moving more toward that and hiring people, scientists, environmental scientists, who are helping them move beyond compliance because they're not just aiming to comply with the law. They do want to become that good corporate citizen. And I think we're going to see that movement more in things like fisheries and as well, that the environment, where there's going to be an economic drive, but I hope we're going to have more of those enterprises who also want to make those moves towards becoming good environmental citizens and corporate citizens. So I hope that that's going to balance at least. And I think that also like leans toward, someone said that, Carson Prichard, came down on the side of the fisheries. He is in favor. He is a scientist who is a sportsman. And so I think that people, even regular citizens, with all the information we have available now, I see people that want to understand both sides. So I hope that the economics won't like be the boss, when the sports people understand. And there's a history in Michigan of hunters and fishers who favor conservation. And I think some of that came through in the interviews as well as in the histories. Yeah.
Could I don't want to skip too far throughout the book, but I did have a comment about your question of something that surprised you that also may relate to something that you were hoping to talk about a little bit later. That's okay, Faith?
Uh-huh.
When I was a kid, my grandfather he fished for bass. So, a little different, but there's so many photos of him holding them up. And actually, I remember as a kid going through all the photos in chronological order, and you could see literally the fish get smaller. And he fished the same area his whole life. And I remember thinking that as a kid, like he clearly got worse at fishing as he got older, right? But I think that speaks to, the moment in the book when I thought about that was the map or the chart of the size of the boats, or was it the number of competitors and the size of the fish in the tournaments, right? Can I ask you, Faith, just generally, like, what did you think about the tournaments? What did you think about, Pritchard is on the sides of the sportsmanship, right? What did you think about the sportsmanship as a part of this factor, as a puzzle piece, kind of driving, for better or for worse, the rise and fall of this, right?
I think that, first of all, I'll say that I think a lot of the people who were giving the oral histories, this is also jumping ahead a bit, but when they talk about the failure of them, several of those guys are like, well, that's what happens, right? This, like, that's a natural phase. It rises, it falls. And they liked, the tournaments. I have never participated, like in a fishing tournament, but I have so many relatives who were hunting, fishing, outdoors people. But what the tournaments made me think about was any small town festival, like in Michigan, because that's my only life, growing up that I have to draw from. But a lot of towns have a festival that's arranged around an agricultural product, right? It could be corn, strawberries. Where I'm from, there's a melon festival, cantaloupe, right? And so I thought about like our town and that in terms of like a fishing tournament, right? So there's a lot of similarities. The people, it happens at a certain time of year. There's a big one that's annual. There's a parade, there are some events, a lot of vendors come in and try to sell things. All these things happen with the fishing tournament, right? But instead of an agricultural product, it's fish because you're a coastal city. And a lot of coastal cities and river cities do have festivals that have to do with boats, with water, with fish. So I really thought about the way that the people were talking about the tournament and about the tournament itself in those same terms of, well, our town had an agricultural festival. And a lot of it was really the same. And they both bring outsiders in. You've got a lot of people from out of town who are there for a weekend or a week. They're spending money. You don't like the way they all act, maybe. They don't all treat your home with respect, right? They're there for the event. And so I tried to think about the tournament in those terms, just to kind of be in mind of the people who enjoy it, who appreciate it. Some of the people are making more money than they're going to make any other, time that year. But the difference is that, of course, when you're depleting the fish, it's not like you can seeds or you can go plant exactly the product. But my aunt and uncle had a cabin at Rainy Lake up in Michigan, which isn't far from Rogers City. It was by Millersburg. And I remember them talking about Rogers City. This is where I'm going to bring up the ice cream. But like we went there for ice cream. We didn't go there to catch fish or watch the fishing tournament. But when there was a lot of people in town, like that was like we would drive, from the cabin just to do something like that, or to go to the lake, to the beach. But I really respected the way that the different people talked about the tournaments, and for all of the analysis that you can put on it, a lot of the people who were telling the way it used to be were like, well, that's what happens. If you want this, you do this. So they seem to have a very matter-of-fact attitudes about it. And that's kind of how I felt about the tournaments. Like it was a blessing, and it also had its drawbacks. But yeah.
Yeah, very cause and effect, right? Very causal. And B adds in the chat about what we were previously talking about, but I think comes around very well. That they say, to add quickly to the previous commentary, economic and conservation go hand in hand, right? They go on, the Great Lakes fuel so much commerce, and much of this commerce depends on the good health of the Great Lakes. Absolutely true, right? And I think to your point, Faith, and the people in the book, the experts talking about, this is just what you get, right? Like, back to the point I was making earlier too, this is the consequence of over dependence, or maybe a very present mentality instead of a very future mentality. But even if you think about, this book talks about a lifetime span of events, really. People, to be, as a generalization, back in the day were a lot less thoughtful about the future of things. And if you look at my parents' house, in their bathroom, they have the slot in their medicine cabinet where you put disposable razors, right? That's something that houses aren't built with anymore, because the value of the culture then was a little bit more disposal based. And I think, to get off my soapbox, but I think that, you do see a shift in perspective today to this sort of hand-in-hand mentality. But I think the people in this book talk about it. They've seen that for years, right? This is not the only instance they've seen of this. And 15139 adds true. And I think local companies have made, to your comment, Faith, about people being going above and beyond.
Right.
They say true. And I think local companies have made those changes. But as cuts come to organizations like the EPA, Fish and Wildlife Organization, and potentials of opening up the lakes to outsiders, people outside the basin, as some at the national level are once again talking about possibility of diversion. This is in danger, or that's in danger, right? These like forerunners, people doing the right thing, because it is, again, this commodity, a boundless commodity. That's my input, not individuals. They go on to say, I think local engagement will be the deciding factor. Yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, it takes a crisis like the collapse of the salmon fishery or the burning of the Cuyahoga River, but before protective actions become prerogative, right? And I think that is pretty common. They go on to say, I'd love to think our politicians, leaders have a sense of history, and we don't need a crisis to plan for sustainability, but I don't see any hope for that. Winky face, a little cheeky winky face, which is funny.
Okay, so I was reading that comment by, I get 15139, and I flipped forward in my notes to something that I have, that I was thinking about that same thing in relation to the algae on the Maumee Bay.
Yeah.
And when the people couldn't drink the water, right? Who would think that people who lived on a coast couldn't drink,
Yeah, Yeah, a freshwater
couldn't
coast.
drink the water. But one of the people, I should have written this down, one of the interviewees in the book, it might have been Frank Christ, but I'm not positive, made a comment about how when the salmon left, the media left. And I immediately thought of the bay and the algae and the pollution in the bay issues. When the bay is covered with algae and they start looking soon, they're looking for it because they want the story. And there's a lot of media attention. The more algae, the more media attention. How bad is it? How does it harm you? Like there's a lot of that. But if you'll notice on the years when there's less algae, there are fewer news stories. And they're not devoting the same amount of time to there's less. Why is there less? What did we do different? What can we repeat? And I think that's exactly like this crisis, plan for sustainability that our number friend mentioned. It's a real issue that when things improve, the media attention dies down, right? But they're right back when it goes bad. And so there's also an issue with media, and I guess people have to invite them to respond and encourage them to respond. But when something environmentally is like getting corrected, when it's going well, let's cover that. Let's talk to people. And I think that's important. And
I also wanted to add B's comment, Faith, and thank you for that. B's
Mhm.
comment was re the 15139 comment. That B says that's where advocacy, particularly from individual citizens in the Great Lakes region, comes in their opinion. And I think 15139 said that too. Like local
Right.
advocacy is huge. And I've talked with a lot of people, again, working at the National Museum of the Great Lakes. You talk to a lot of people about the Great Lakes and industry. I've heard people talk about they're thinking about how are we going to exist in 50 years, right? Like what can we do today? So because a lot of these companies are intergenerational or handed down, father to son, parent to child. They want their grandchildren and great grandchildren to be able to do the same thing that their grandfather or great grandfather did, in a way that I think has made a lot of them into advocates too for these small things. And you're right, Faith. I'll say about the news. The news loves to sensationalize these very challenging things, and when they get better, suddenly they're nowhere in sight. They're just
Right,
gone.
yeah. If the excitement goes, the coverage goes. And yeah, that is something that everybody can do, to make success more interesting, right?
Yeah.
Even if the success just means it's not getting bad, right? Mitigation takes time.
Well,
Um,
and to your earlier question about these complicated relationships, right, of these food webs, like think about how we're here in Toledo, Ohio. I have always lived within a few hours of these events, and before reading the book, I had never heard of them. And
okay.
it's to that point, it's the locals who are the ones most invested, most obviously, right? This
Mhm.
implication is across the entire Great Lakes, but it's the locals who feel it, who live it, who have to deal with the algae in the water, right?
Right.
15139 says, very true, Faith. And to B's comment, yes, I would say that only one, that's the only thing that ever matters, but it's hard to keep that in people's minds. We think we solve a problem and it's done, when the truth is it's not like fixing a car, building a shed. Yeah, it's never done. It requires constant engagement. That can be fatiguing. Yeah, and disheartening, right? Because the work is never done. Um, the work is really never done, but it is a challenge, right?
Yeah. Um, and then, like talking about when the work is done or not done, that's a good time to talk about the way that Carson Prichard covered the crash,
Good
right?
transition.
I loved the way that he shared with us how he was like intellectually approaching like the word crash and the idea of the crash. It was almost like a follow-up to the prologue there, where he said, he was kind of like, honestly, this is how I was thinking about it, but this is what I learned. And I love when a researcher takes that humble approach and shares here's what my thought process was, and here's how I changed it. And when he talked about the crash, and he talked about people looked forward to the tournament, they were excited, and then when it stopped, it's like, okay, here's Rogers City now. It's not just the tournament went away. It's like, okay, Rogers City is still here. And what's going to happen? And I like you could tell that he reframed his own idea and let like me as a reader or you as a reader know, hey, I've reframed my thinking on this. I thought it was the crash, but it's this. And the crash became not like the conclusion or the ending exactly. It became part of the story. And then he still talked to people. Okay, what about after that? Because he was, I think, following their lead. They wanted to talk about what happened after it. And so, um, I think he changed the way he looked at it and he let us know he did. And I felt like he was just really respecting um, the people, the way that he handled that, the part about the crash. And I wondered if other people noticed that too, if they appreciated it. And that also the way that the people in the city talked about the crash, the people in the histories, it really contributed even more to the way I felt like this is a community in conversation with itself, and I get to witness it. I get to be here for it. Did other people notice that too? Like did you appreciate the way he introduced that?
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. I think Carson was being very respectful to the residents and to the community in general, just in referring to it as a decline or a um, it's almost more of a transformation rather
Mm-hmm.
than a crash. You go from a highly Pacific salmon centric fishery into now what's more of uh, a native, lake perch, or sorry, lake trout and walleye population. So it seems like the fishery is recovering, and um, it seems that the residents are appreciative of the fact that they're not getting as much attention. They like being able to go out and fish
Yes.
by themselves and not compete with outsiders. So in that way, I think they, were uh, more positive in their response to the question about the crash as it was.
Yeah, and I like how he explained that this is like the word he's going to be used, but he made it very clear what his, thoughts and feelings were. And Andrew brings up like the good point that, there's like there was a settling down of things that they appreciated. Like they're still thriving to a degree, but it's not like the heyday of, this big commercial excitement. And I know people still go there, but it's probably the same families who grew up going there. Like there's a week in the summer where you go up that coast, and if you're a fisher, you fish, and if you're like beach come, it's back, but without the big excitement. And I like the way that Andrew said worded that. And somebody else has something about
Yes, I
okay.
15139 follows up too, and I think thank you, Andrew, for saying that. Because
Yeah.
I think it segues into this point too, that 15139 says here we run into economics again. They fertilizer loading has been going on for decades. We know what's causing it, agriculture, right? EPA studies said that for 5 decades. I've said that for 5 decades, but we also like food. And in Carson's case, the sports fishing, right? And so they go on. I think it's really I think the reality is some of the negative consequences are just going to have to be accepted. And I think, and I'll go on. There will be winners and losers in certain localities. unless we're ready to really change as a society. And I think to Andrew's point, they shifted from one type of fish to another and kind of embraced, I think, or made the most out of, well, now suddenly eyes aren't on us to the same capacity. Like we get to do things, what for the love of it again, right? I think that kind of was the underpinning that I got the sense of, or people trying to make the most of what they can, and trying to adapt. But
Okay, and there was one thing that I had saved for if we, I think we've had like really good input and conversation so far. In this one, I kind of saved out separate because it was about the harbor upgrade. And it was important to the story that Carson Prichard was putting forth, the people's stories. But I kind of thought of it as an independent issue in the sense that we're here in Toledo where we're having river revitalization, right? And some of the old businesses are feeling a little bit put to the side, but there's new growth, there's new development, there's new things that are better for the environment, there's new methods of doing things. And the harbor upgrade was, and then all of the money that was lost, afterward, right? That's devastating. It's huge, it's exciting, and it's devastating. But it's something that a lot of coastal cities, and I'm including the lakes and the rivers, like in the Great Lakes, are dealing with right now. Like in Toledo, we're dealing with upgrades to the waterfront. And some people think that the upgrades are upgrades, and some people disagree. Deals are getting made, right? Businesses might get huge tax cuts and grant money for doing a certain thing in the riverfront that fits the city's mission. And I'm intentionally not like approving or denigrating like the city's mission, at this time. Just the fact that communities are affected and change when a city or a municipality gets an idea of we're going to do this to our waterfront. A lot of it in Toledo is making people who are in the neighborhoods of the upgrades happy. And sometimes the people in the neighborhoods have felt ignored for decades, like in East Toledo, the riverfront revitalization. You will hear a lot of people go, I'm so happy that they're fixing our side of the city now. People are proud, they're pleased, they're coming back, to the water. We have a beautiful park next door to the museum that, Toledo Metro Parks took 2 years to build. And now people from cities all over the country are coming to Toledo to look at the park that we have next door, to take that kind of park planning back to their homes. And we know for a fact here at the museum that the people in the neighborhoods that have bought the park are thrilled to have attention and to have city services and to have city beautification on their side of the river. But there are also things like with a harbor upgrade, right? Was it done to accommodate the outsiders and attract them, and then the outsiders go, there goes your money, right? So I think that the like next step in that discussion, like related to the harbor upgrade and to related what's happening is, are you making upgrades that will benefit your community when the visitors go, right? When the sales fall, are your upgrades still upgrades that you are, happy to have? And I think that the people in Rogers City, I think a lot of them were left questioning, after that. Does this, benefit us? And so I think that more coastal cities on Lake Huron in particular learned from what happened in Rogers City. And sometimes what, might harm that community is going to benefit, others farther down the line, with the analysis. But I wondered if other people also thought about, I know we have people that live like in town or in other river cities or lake cities, that are members and come to the book club or who will be watching it. And I wondered if other people thought about that too, with the harbor upgrade. Like, this is something that we have in the news right here every day. And so even though it was, in the Rogers City story, that's really a timeless issue. Did you think about Toledo, Chris, when you read that part?
I did. And I'm just a kid from Akron. Don't sue me, LeBron. And I think about that all the time when I was a kid there. This, change always leaves people behind, right? Um, for better or for worse. But actually, I don't have to have an opinion because Paulette has a comment in the chat. So I'm going to go
Okay.
to that. But I do agree. I did notice this sort of revitalization, especially it's in our backyard. I mean, we see it. I feel like we talk about it all the time. We see it every day.
Yeah, we literally look out the window and see the revitalization
And
happening.
it's right there. Sometimes
Mhm.
across the river, sometimes next door, sometimes in
Right.
our own building. Because our expansion is almost over, right? So we're a part of the revitalization too. And we're on land that 20 years ago was a power plant that
Right.
moved, that decided to move because this power plant here wasn't as efficient, didn't make as much money, was old.
Right.
And
And
really,
the parkland is planting native plants. They're planting water smart and the depressions, like
yeah.
rain gardening methods. They're planting milkweed to bring monarchs back. There's like all these choices are being made. Um, really, well, I mean, there's going to be economic things. For instance, in the park, there's going to be some urban camping, and there
Yeah.
might be some people in the neighborhood who aren't thrilled, right, about urban camping, but it supports the park and it might lead other people to appreciate the nature, too.
Well, and Toledo's population is about a quarter million. This past
Yes.
winter, their second winter, they celebrated their millionth visitor. That's a lot of people from outside of Toledo. We have two comments from Paula and Chet. I want to get
Yep.
to both of them. Paula says every year a group of about 60 Ohioans representing groups dealing with Lake Erie coverage in DC during Great Lakes Days about the health of Lake Erie. That's right. Actually, our director, Kate Fineski,
Yep.
went with that group this year to DC to talk about the health of our lake and our backyard, right? These folks meet with the elected officials from Ohio to discuss and promote health of the Great Lakes Initiative and maintain the support of the elected folks in Ohio who decide where budget money support that initiative and related initiatives, including toxic growth in the Western Bay of Lake Erie. Sorry about my cadence there, but yeah, it's really excited. I mean, they're back to our point about local people, like we are our best advocates, right? So locals go to DC to these people making decisions who maybe haven't been in Ohio or in our backyard to see the algae bloom, or maybe haven't had to deal with the question of where am I going to get my drinking water from, right? Paulette goes on, the other states abutting the Great Lakes have also have folks meeting their elected representatives to support the health of the Great Lakes. Yeah, I mean we're all in this together, right? 15139 says yes, excellent point, Faith, and I second that. I've lived on Lake Erie my entire life near Cleveland, and I think about all of the industry leaving in the 1970s, and we are just finally getting the waterfront somewhat restored. Yeah, right. Especially you see the mass exodus in the 70s that I agree. 50 years later, we're just starting to figure out what to do about. But they go on, but it is still aggravating because the steel mills and other industries used the region for whatever they wanted and then left. And who paid for all the cleanup and restoration? Not them, the taxpayers. Yeah, it is
Right.
these people who used up the system. I was talking about this earlier, cannibalized their own market space and then just left. And now one of the things I've heard about living in a post-industrial city, a Rust Belt city, however you described it, is we do things the hard way on purpose. And somewhat we have no choice but to do things the hard way because that's all we can do, right? But I don't know. Faith, do you have any we're just about time, everyone. We could talk all day really, but we're
It's
just
just
about time. And I
I
would
did
like
want to
to.
say just one thing about wrapping it up. I really appreciate the conversation we had today. I think it was really valuable. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm in the process of choosing books for next year's book club. And so you can email the info address at the museum and put my name or Chris's name in it, or you can email me at faith.curry@nmlg. I almost said our name wrong, .org. But if you have a specific kind of book, thank you, or type of book, a particular book, I would love recommendations. I'm thinking about a couple different kinds. Next year, we're going to have one that's different than we've ever had before. And that's going to be a surprise to announce later, but it's going to be fun and still regional. And if there are particular discussions that you would like covered, particular topics, kinds of books, we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely true. I put Faith's
And thank you
email
for
in.
participating this year, everyone.
Yes. Thank you for being here. I put Faith's email in the chat, put the info email at the chat. Again, that's Faith, Faith .currie at nmgl.org. I also be in the chat had a great question. Where can we find this year's book list? What a wonderful question. We have two places I think are really great to look. One is nmglstore.org, and I posted a link specifically to our book club bundle. They're also available at your local library. Some of them have ebooks, right? So check that out to, support the authors however it feels best. You could find information on our YouTube channel where you could watch actually the past two book talks and learn a little bit about that. And we look forward to having you again next year. We look forward to seeing you this summer, this winter, this fall, anytime, anywhere, really. We're just kind of excited to, share, celebrate, preserve the past, present, and future of our Great Lakes. And as I think we've all kind of talked about today, it's us, the locals, who kind of have to do all the legwork, right? Not the company that leads. So, Faith, do you have any other last closing thoughts?
I don't think so. I'm just really glad at how our book club went this year. And I did just want to add, if it doesn't work for you to buy the books from the bookstore, Raging Erie was put out by Columbia University Press, and the Salmon Capital of Michigan was from Wayne State University Press. And I am trying to choose quality, excellent books for us that also sometimes come from regional or local presses. And so that's what two of our three books were this year. And the one that was from a major press was from someone who was writing all based on family history right here in the area.
And I'm glad you said that, Faith. I put the
Yes.
direct chat or the direct line to Wayne State University's press, because that is one of the best ways to support books like this is directly
Yes.
from the press.
Thank
Sorry
you.
to
Yeah,
interrupt.
if we can keep it regional, good. Well, thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you all. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't mean that enough. I'm looking forward to Faith's surprise. She hasn't told me what it is yet, so I'm just as eagerly awaiting as all of you. But if you want to watch this again, if you want to watch this today, tomorrow, for the rest of your life, it will be available at our YouTube channel. You could find the link in the chat here, or you go to nmgl.org and find our social medias there. Look for that, soon. But I hope all of you have a great day, whenever you are, wherever you are. It was great to see you, only for an hour. So take care, everyone.